Organizational Leadership and Learning Program at the University of Louisville. I'm excited to start a new series entitled Leadership and Legacy, where you will get the chance to hear from leaders who come from a variety of different fields to share their knowledge, their expertise, and insight about organizational leadership and what the future holds for different leaders and organizations. And so our interviewee today is the one and only Sean Dawley, and I'm extremely excited to have him as part of our interview today. Sean, if you would just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background, as well as the industry in which you work in.
Sure. Thank you, Randy. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Yep. My name is Sean Dawley. I'm the president of OT2 Consulting. It is a leadership development and keynote speaking firm. I came out of the corporate world as a director and vice president. But prior to that, I spent 25 years in the U.S. Air Force, predominantly as a pilot and a commander. So most of my leadership mistakes were made in that arena, and picked up a few lessons along the way. And now I try to leverage those rather than taking them to the grave with me through keynotes and leadership training, share those insights, however meager they may be, with corporate clients, nonprofits, other organizations.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing and thank you for being with us today. So, Sean, when you think about organizations and leadership, there's a vast amount of experience that you have gained. How would you define the term organizational leadership in your own words?
It's something that I spend a lot of time considering, and I don't pretend like I am the one who invented this perspective, but I look at leadership as a privilege by which you are there to serve the people entrusted to your care. And I know that that might sound a bit cliche. Everybody likes to, I think, embrace this idea of the noble leader. But at the end of the day, if people spend 1/3 of their life asleep, 1/3 of their life on their own time, and 1/3 of their life in work in some capacity, the idea that you are privileged to be in a position of leadership in their life at that moment is something that we shouldn't take lightly. So when I think of leadership, it carries a heavy price tag. At times, leadership requires some degree of burden and loneliness. But at the end of the day, I feel like if I, as a leader, am taking care of the people will take care of the mission.
I love that. You know, leadership has its expression in different ways, at different levels, different dynamics. So is it possible to not be the CEO or founder of an organization, but maybe you're a subordinate to a certain extent and still be a leader? In other words, talk about what it means to be a follower, but yet still be a leader in that same space.
Sure. So things like CEO, vice president, captain, general, manager, supervisor, athletic director, coach, those are titles. But leadership has to exist at every single level of every echelon of any organization. If it is a 5-person operation or a 50,000-person operation, if at any level, from the very top of that pyramid to the lowest level of responsibility, if there is not good leadership at every echelon, I will show you a broken organization. So we all answer to somebody. Even the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies answer to boards, to the chairman, chairwomen of the board. So at some point, we're all answering to somebody. So when you are in that middle management, somewhere between, say, vice president and manager and everything in between, you're receiving direction from your leader. And what I always concluded was that if what my boss is telling me is legal, moral, and ethical, I have a professional obligation to embrace that guidance as if it were my own. Because I may be leading people that are on the org chart subordinate to me, but I'm subordinate in that capacity to somebody else. And what really can become corrosive in an organization is when somebody in one of the intermediary levels of leadership is letting it be known to their followers that they're not on board with the higher ups. And that's easier said than done. Theoretically, that's easy to do. But when you have to be the bearer of bad news and advocate on behalf of a policy that you are not in full congruence with, it just requires an extra level of just, professional humility to make sure that even as a subordinate, you're leading your people, but you're doing it in a way that is uh, showing the respect, due to the person above you. But again, those caveats: moral, legal, ethical. You ask me to do something dirty, and all bets are off, right? But if that guidance is within bounds, as an intermediary leader, that's a real art, vice science. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. With that, there's the inevitable, and that is change, right? That every organization is faced with change. As people, we have to deal with change. We may not always like it, but it is an inevitable reality of life
Yeah.
and our work in our profession. If you would, what would you share as tips and techniques for organizations to better adapt to change in the workplace?
Yeah. So if you had been born a few hundred years ago, your life at home and at the workplace, whatever that may be, would have looked absolutely the same as your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents. But now we're living in an era whereby every generation, like let's say defined by 20-year increments, uh, is having this radical assimilation of new technology into the profession. As fast as change is right now, it is possible that change may never be this slow again. And so, we've got now 5 generations in the workforce, from boomers to Gen Z. We need to be mindful that everybody has a different emotional tolerance to change. It may be easy for you, to accommodate, new variations in how we do our work. As leaders, we have to be mindful that people within our organization are going to respond to that change emotionally different from one another. And so what I remind myself of, that old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. I'll quickly use an analogy to point out why that can be good, but why that can be bad. If I'm winning a football game by 3 touchdowns in the third quarters, I'm sticking with that game plan because I'm in the execution phase, right? But if that's a division rival that I've got to play again in 7 weeks, I've got to come in with a slightly different strategy because they've had a chance now to watch the same tape. So when it comes to change, I understand there'll be some pushback. People working fine. It's efficient, it's effective, we're making money. I got it. We might not change this week, but we have to be thinking about how we're going to accommodate changes in the business environment, the financial environment, amongst our competitors, and within our own workforce demographics. So again, in the immediate term, I understand that. We shouldn't always be jumping to the next new shiny object, but looking long term, we need to surround ourselves with some people who challenge our thinking, who challenge our perspective of the situation as it is, and have the courage to challenge our assessment of the plan going forward.
I really love that, because it's a good reminder that missions and milestones don't change, but at times the method does need to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
that's
right.
part of just how time continues to change, evolve, and as you mentioned, the varying characteristics of new and emerging generations in our modern workforce. Sticking alongside this topic and considering time as we consider the past, the present, let's consider the future. And so, from a general standpoint, John, if you had the chance to look into the next 25 years as it pertains to organizational development as well as leadership, what do you see? What comes to mind? What might we anticipate across a multitude of different organizations, maybe in the next quarter century?
Randy, I'm holding up my iPhone 6. I'm not a tech savvy guy. I don't run out to Best Buy every time there's a new fancy device that hits the market. I don't wear a Bluetooth earpiece. I'm a late adopter on all technology. But just as the way global finance has changed and internationalized the supply chain, just as robotics and automation changed manufacturing, AI is coming for white collar jobs. AI is coming for the knowledge force. Uh, there, there was a time when, like, as a vice president, I would need to type out a position description for maybe a new director that I was going to hire. And then I would hand that to HR and they would clean it up and make it consistent with policy. I played around with that ChatGPT just a couple of months ago when I heard about it. And I gave like the 3 or 4 key requirements of what I would want in this fictitious director. And I said, give it to me, 2/3 of a page long. And it kicked out in 10 seconds what would have taken me, an hour to manually produce. Okay. So I think that right now we are like that first tribe that discovered how to wield fire. We're not quite sure what we got, but just as there are now robots that are assembling three-dimensional tangible products on assembly lines, the integration of AI into the knowledge workforce is going to be the biggest shift in humanity probably since the printing press. Now, but quickly, I'll pivot and I'll say, when you look at the integration of technology into our lives, if you go back to, like, say 2008 with the advent of like the first smartphone, the iPhone 1, what have you, in the past 15 years, we've seen rises in self-reports of isolation, self-harm, suicidal ideation, prescriptions of psychotropic medications for anxiety, depression. Humanity right now is in a crisis for authentic human contact. So as it relates to leaders, while we're surrounding ourselves with technology, there is this innate yearning inside of all of us to feel genuinely connected to people in something other than a transactional way. It can't simply be, I'll do enough not to get fired. You pay me enough so I won't quit. There's going to be, I think, a monumental shift, almost like a renaissance, I hope, in this just genuine, yearning for authentic connection. So leaders are going to have a heavy lift because they're working with people who are feeling increasingly emotionally disconnected in a world that has never been more technologically connected.
Wow, I love that. It's so much to consider, right? And for us, really trying all that we can to be proactive with the changes and the advancement in technology and AI, as you mentioned. And so, as we wrap up, what as in terms of closing remarks, again, this interview series is entitled "Leadership and Legacy." When you think about yourself as a leader and the legacy that you'll be able to leave behind, what do you consider to be your leadership mantra? What do you pride yourself on as a leader, Sean, as you close us out?
We have perfected / are perfecting the science of management. We are really good at using that aforementioned technology and well codified protocols to make things better, cheaper, and faster, to provide more efficient, more effective services. And to do that, a leader does have some tangible responsibilities to keep the proverbial trains running on time. But what I found out the hard way, because I didn't get it right the first few leadership jobs I had, was I was looking at people for what they did, measuring them by their output, providing them the resources to be productive. But as I began to figure out that when these people walk across the threshold to come into work each day, they don't flip a switch and become somebody else. They're the same person that showed up with all of their goings on in their life, embodied within them. And so what I would challenge leaders to remember is that you do have a responsibility to resource people and hold them accountable for what they do. Don't ever forget that they are worthy of your respect simply for who they are. These are people. They're mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters. They were people before they came to work. there'll be people when they leave work, and if you are in a position of leadership and just for a small segment of their life, you are privileged to be somebody important to them because you are their leader, don't overlook the easy things, which is to treat them with the respect and dignity they deserve simply because they're one of God's children.
Well, Sean, thank you so much. I love that respect. It's one of the most basic elements of life, of a life
Yeah.
principle. And so thank you for that, sir. There you have it, the one and only Mr. Sean Dawley. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your insight, your intellect, and most importantly, thank you for your service. And so I know
Thank you.
this interview will be certainly useful and beneficial for all who will view it. And we look forward to discussing more as time progresses. So that's it for our time today, leadership and legacy. And so we will continue to interview tremendous leaders across the globe to gain, again, better knowledge, insight about organizations and leadership. So as always, I'm Dr. Randy Whetstone Jr., Program Director for the Organizational Leadership and Learning Program. Stay safe, stay well, and as always, be the difference that makes a difference. Take care.